Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in from Philadelphia, PA. And as always, joined by my good friend, Sensei Paul. What's going on? How are things in Boulder, Paul?
Hey, Scott. Things are going really well. Late summer, kids are back in school. Still have some nice, real warm to hot days going on. My soccer season started 3 weeks ago now. So I've got 3 games under my belt, and that's feeling really good. And all is well.
Nice. It's cool that you're still doing the soccer league. That's great. I know you love it.
Still doing. I'll be 62 in a few weeks. And,
wow.
Still going. I won't say necessarily going strong, but still going. And that's all I'm asking for.
That's fantastic. Unfortunately, I retired from basketball about 10 years ago, but I do miss that.
Good run. Still a good run for you.
I had a good run. Now it's I do a lot of walking. It's less painful. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. As we mentioned at the end of our last episode, we're going to talk about the change in Paul's newsletter and his shift to a new title. So Zen at Work is now called the Zen Shift. And it's really excellent material. And I just wanted to kind of go into it with you, Paul, and see how you came up with this and talk about what it means. And there's a lot of different things that are shifting now. And so I know that part of what you talk about is the outer and inner dimension, that both are shifting. And so let's start with the outer shift. And how does that come about? And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. Just to give a little background there for those who might know. Yeah, I've called my newsletter Zen at Work today because my consultancy is called Zen at Work for the last 4 years since I've been doing the newsletter. And it was focused on bringing the mind of Zen, so a meditative mind, a contemplative mind, a conscious mind, into primarily work settings, in order to excel, be highly performant, be highly purposive, to understand what the purpose is. And that's been my main theme. But I found, especially now, that theme to broaden in that there is a real broad paradigm shift, going on globally, which is now like no longer deniable. It's just affecting all aspects of life. So I've always been about not compartmentalizing, the professional, the personal, and the spiritual aspects of your life. We've talked about the 3 contracts on this podcast and how it's really important to kind of deepen and integrate all 3 of those areas. And now that's becoming more and more necessary to do that consciously, because it's just impossible to keep them compartmentalized, because this overall paradigm shift that's happening is affecting everything. So what is this outer paradigm shift, that we're talking about here? Well, it's a very deep shift in how we understand ourselves and our relation to the cosmos, to reality, you could say. We've had these presiding cosmological understandings around what it means to be human and what the nature of reality is all about. And without going into the whole, history of that, we can kind of safely say that the last several hundred years have been a very materialist paradigm, a physicalist paradigm, where we're looking to understand the atomic structure of matter and feel that once we understand that and how particles interact with each other, we can understand everything from there, right? And that kind of translates into a kind of a psychological paradigm where we're all independent people because our bodies are separate from each other, ergo our beings are separate from each other, because it's very physicalist. So if the physical dimension is separate, the entire dimension is separate. It also extends into political philosophy, right? Both capitalism and Marxism are materialist philosophies, with capitalism being focused on capital and Marxism being focused on capital and the means of production. But, Marx famously said that religion was the opiate of the masses. So kind of steadfast disavowal of any sort of, say, spiritual dimension beyond the material. And capitalism basically sort of feels that way too, although they don't maybe explicitly say it as much as Marxism does. So it extends into that, and it extends, very much into our sense of ourselves. So there's been a very deep investigation into the nature of consciousness, right? And what's called the hard problem of consciousness, which is basically how could the material of the brain, as complicated as it is and as amazing as it is, how could that produce this thing called consciousness, which is an experience of interiority and an experience of being? How can that happen? And there's all sorts of what I consider to be crazy theories to try to explain that, but ultimately it's not possible actually to create that. And it kind of relates to AI, because people who think that you can move to consciousness from a kind of a computational model, there's no evidence that you can do that. There's no evidence at all that consciousness actually does derive from exclusively from physical, transfer of electrical signals between neurons, as sophisticated as they may be. So that hard problem has been a problem, I would call it an anomaly, because the materialist paradigm, is not whole enough. It doesn't cover the whole of reality. The paradigm shift we're in the middle of right now is shifting from a physicalist paradigm to what you could call one of my terms for it is from an atomist paradigm to an animist paradigm. So the atomist is particles and the animist is living spirit, right? So this flips the consciousness brain relationship on its head, and it realizes that consciousness is primary and the material universe is, in a sense, a phenomenon of consciousness. Whereas a lot of people are thinking that consciousness is a phenomenon or an epiphenomenon of the brain, of the physical substrate. But really what we're coming to see is that the consciousness paradigm, as the basis, appears to be much, much, much more consistent and coherent with reality as we're coming to see it. And it's also consistent with quantum field theory. I had to go there, right? But that's the world we're living in right now, is that the implications of quantum physics in terms of the relationship between time, space, and consciousness, and the relationship between matter, energy, and consciousness is much more in the realm of consciousness being absolutely fundamental to all of those things. Time, space, matter, and energy. So this is unquestionably an emergent paradigm shift that's happening in the external world. It's having implications for everything, including our social systems, which are very much based on lines of power and institutions and an understanding of what reality is like. So our breakdown of institutions and authority is partly happening because of this paradigm shift, which is putting the primacy of consciousness first. So there's a lot more implications that we can delve into around that, but that is the primary, massive, amazing, and super interesting external paradigm shift that's happening.
That was excellent. Thank you. I do feel like we are in a very unique time, and I like to look at history and think about change. Obviously, things change a lot, but I feel like it's accelerating now. And I think that based on what some of the stuff you were saying, one thing that's accelerating very rapidly is our understanding of the brain itself. And I've been listening to some things about that, and we're way further ahead than where we were years ago in terms of understanding neuroplasticity and things that are happening and how external factors affect us internally. So that's one shift. And then you also mentioned technology and AI. And I also like to think about in 20, 30 years from now, they're going to talk about this time as a transformative time in terms of computing and how AI is affecting our life, and robotics and driverless vehicles and things like that. And it's super interesting. I mean, we've been through in our lifetime the age of the internet and the cell phone. These things have drastically changed everything in terms of work and our personal lives. But I feel like it's going faster now.
Yes.
And I feel like that I try to work on the internal shift while paying attention to the external activities. And I know that some people maybe are overwhelmed with what's happening in the outside world, but how do you then deal with the inner shift? How do you try and understand what's happening in the outer world and then adjust your own internal thought processes to deal with it?
Yeah, that's a big thing. Before I get into the inner shift, I want to really acknowledge what you're saying there about the acceleration, because that's a key part of it. Because we can look back at paradigm shifts that have happened in culture and science over the last 10,000 years, and they have a certain structure to them. But what is very unique here is the rapidity with which the shift is happening. And I heard one, kind of analysis. I don't know how scientific it was a few years ago I read, which is that there's kind of an acceleration factor of 20 that's been happening over the last, tens of thousands of years, which means that a shift that used to take 8,000 years then took 400 years. Then that shift took 20 years.
Wow.
And then the next shift took 1 year.
Wow.
So, and I've kind of applied this as I look at AI and some of the changes in technology that we've experienced. I mean, I'm 62 years old, so I've been around the block a bit. And, I grew up without computers on desks.
Yeah.
And I'm looking back and I'm seeing, the things that, I can really say things that are happening that take 1 year to happen now probably would have taken 20 years to happen 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That actually kind of maps, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I also, with specifically around AI, what I've been reading too is that the developments are happening so quickly that there's a bunch of people that are actually very concerned about it because there's not a lot of guardrails. Yeah. And there's some folks in Silicon Valley that want to, they want to be unleashed and do what they want. And then there's other people, obviously, the politicians in DC don't really know what to do about it. Yeah. And then there's also the healthcare aspect of it, because some people believe that we're at this age now where we could revolutionize some things in healthcare, like discovering diseases or finding cures or building genes, that work better. And I think it's amazing what we could see in the next 10 to 20 years, or maybe even less. Right. And so that's great, but there's also concerns. So how do you feel about the rapid acceleration? Is it a good thing, a bad thing, or both?
Well, it's both, and it is what it is. So we need to deal with it. But one thing that is very important to recognize is that when paradigm shifts did unfold over 20, 40, 100 years, you would have multiple generations that were actually able to internalize the shift, right? Which happened with the Copernican revolution, the Galilean revolution, the Newtonian revolution, the Einsteinian revolution, the quantum revolution, right? Although quantum, we're getting up into modern time. There's a real famous quote by Thomas Kuhn, the famous philosopher of science or historian of science. And he kind of popularized the term paradigm shift back in the 60s. And he said, paradigms shift one funeral at a time. Okay. That means, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and people do hold on to their way of seeing the world, as we see from the church, and we see from older scientists, including Einstein, who can't get around, to the deeper paradigm oftentimes. So, and Kuhn said this, you have to wait for the old generation to die off. Yeah. And then the newer generation who come up, they've now internalized the new reality. Well, guess what? If these things are moving so fast, you can't wait for people to die off. So it's all happening in a very uncontrolled way. Okay. So that brings us to like the inner part. So how do we deal with that? how do we deal when the whole structure of our self-understanding, our power systems, our cultural, sense-making mechanisms and meaning-making mechanisms are being destabilized and reformed with such rapidity? Well, the inner experience, the mind of meditation, the moving into a very intimate, close relationship with your own quality of being that isn't dependent upon your ideas, but is dependent upon your own sense experience and your own experience. That's the way to deal, with movement. You just say, because it's really, a lot of it is just, we're making problems for ourselves by trying to control or even understand what's happening, right, and where it's going to go. So as we've spoken about many times on this podcast, it's the mind of not knowing, it's the mind of surrender, it's the mind of not controlling, it's the mind of not, being so invested in speculating about what the future is going to hold, with all of the fearful alarms and all of the cortisol that's shooting through our system around all that stuff. All of those are what the Buddha called the second arrow. Yeah. But to return to presence and to be present with the changes with full body and mind, full body and heart and mind, that's the way to deal with an accelerating situation.
There's something that you taught me that I love. It's like, we're not really in control. I know you've mentioned that to me many times. And I think sometimes when I try and control my emotions or work or whatever, and then I think that I play that in my head. I'm like, well, I'm just going to go with it, be in the present moment, and I really can't control it. And who knows what's going to happen, but it is also a game, and this is the game of Zen, right? And the game is always changing, and there's always adjustments that we need to make. And I think that for me personally, the more that I pay attention to what's happening on the outer side, the more I can shift myself to fit what's happening in the outer world. Mm-hmm. And maybe I do it too much. I do love the news and I love the world and I'm interested in a lot of things, but it also helps me just sort of deal with the massive change that goes on. So how do you apply your Zen principles and your Buddhist practice to the rapid, because things are changing so rapidly, how do you use your skill sets for that?
Well, I was just going to ask you the same thing.
Okay.
How have you been practicing Zen for a number of years? And how does it show up for you in terms of, you're doing a startup, you've got other projects going on, you've got investments going in the midst of crazy political situation and geopolitical chaos. How do you do it?
Well, certainly meditation is huge. Walking, meditation as well, getting out in nature. I really like to unplug from the computer at times and just go out in the woods and wander around. Of course, I love talking to you about this stuff and reading, your material and trying to understand. I also talk to a lot of people and get their opinions and try and see what's going on in their world and understand what's happening in different parts of the world. And it's just I feel like I'm constantly studying and learning and trying to adjust. And then I run out of time at the end of the day and I try again the next day. But there's also a bit of surrender that goes into it. I definitely don't get to this point where, okay, I got everything figured out today, I'm good. It's always, it's like a work in progress and it'll go on forever, I hope. And I think that's the right way to approach it, because you're never going to really figure everything out, right?
Never. No, never. Yeah. So I love that answer. It's kind of returning to your presence and your place of center. And that's kind of my answer too, is that mind of meditation, to give up the control, the surrender, the need to figure everything out, but to know that you can expand your clarity and you can expand your capacity, which meditative mind brings you. Whether you're doing a formal meditation or not, you can always inquire, deeply, and not in a alarmist, self-centered way, but just really, really look at what's going on here. What's going on here? What's going on with me? What's going on with this business? What's going on in the world? Really, really ask in a deep way. So that's one part of it. That's the prajna side, the insight side. And then there's the capacity, the ability to be emotionally centered and grounded no matter what's going on in your life or in the world. And this is something we can cultivate, something we can develop. And if we don't have, some level of clarity and some level of capacity, the capacity is the compassion side. So one is the wisdom, one is the compassion side, to be able to hold and be with, the feelings of yourself and others, family and others. If you don't have those, you're kind of just subject to the whims of the world, basically, right? So those two things are really important in terms of the powers, in a sense, that you're developing. And then in terms of your intention and your orientation, you can ground that wherever you want to ground that. I ground that in my Buddhist vows. I want to help people grow in consciousness, grow in wisdom and compassion. I want to help people, relieve their own suffering. And I know that a lot of suffering is self-created. That's kind of where my teaching comes from, because that's where my experience has been. That's what brought me to Buddhism, is I realized that I think I'm causing most of this suffering. I think I'm doing it. I don't think it's from the outside. And it turned out that was true. Yeah. And my practice was able. So I want to help other people see that too, and be much, much happier in their lives. So with those three things, those are the three things that come out of, say, meditation practice, like you say, that I think are, really essential and really helpful to meeting these times.
I also just want to talk about coaching and friends and mentors and therapists. And there's all sorts of ways, there's all sorts of people. I'm very grateful and blessed in my life to have a lot of really smart and wonderful, caring people like you and my good buddies and my therapists and all that. And I think that I use a lot when things get a little crazy. I am much more open now in talking about what's going on. And I love getting advice from everyone. I love talking to my children. I've been, now that they're older, and I talk to them about stuff, real stuff now, more than I used to, because they're adults and they're going through things too. And so I think that internalizing stuff is good and thinking is good, but also speaking out loud about what's going on, what you're suffering from, and seeking advice from people. And it could be from people or it could be from a podcast that you listen to. Yeah. And you learn. I've been listening to more podcasts about the brain, for example, and I'm learning things about that. And so I think it's really a combination of things that help me do it, and reading books. And it's all connected in some way. But the more that I learn from all the studying, the better I can deal with the craziness out there in the world.
So you've touched on a really important aspect of the inner shift that we're talking about here. So the old paradigm was that we're isolated individuals with our own psychologies and our own minds, and we're very isolated. Okay. So a lot of what we experience, emotionally and subjectively and psychologically, was always just something happening within ourselves. So we go see a doctor to get some drugs, or we go to a therapist, to get some therapy to help us work with that, or we go to a professional coach to help us deal with our independent, atomized, separate stuff that we have going on. Okay, the new paradigm recognizes that we are all connected, that we all arise from the same element. Okay, you could call it spirit, you could call it the quantum field, call it the absolute. Okay, call it whatever you will, but that is at the deepest level all of our nature. We really are connected. So our words have profound effect on each other. Our minds actually have profound effect on each other. So we move out of this very crazy pathological paradigm where everything is like our individual problem. And we recognize that the part of the inner shift is to open up and recognize that we are connected to other people and other beings. And we start to feel more comfortable, hopefully, interacting with people almost as peers in networks of belonging and in communities of care, because that's the real essence, is our true nature as being all together. So that needs to happen. There's a lot of people who are not going to get that shift. They're going to be in the old paradigm, and they're going to keep kind of trying to fix themselves as if they're separate when they're not.
I know we talk about Thich Nhat Hanh often here, and he had this theory of engaged Buddhism and interbeing.
Yeah.
And he came over to the West from Vietnam, and he said, you don't have to be a monk and go to a monastery to practice Buddhism. And then the other thing he talked about with interbeing is like, we are, like you just said, everything is connected, and everything we do has an effect on the world, really. And so when you think about that, even just random people that you meet in the street, you smile, or you say hello, or you thank the cashier at the supermarket, or whatever it might be, or someone driving and you let them go in front of you. And something like that is important, and it changes that other person. Yes. And I just find that I've gotten better at that over time. And I think it's also just working on myself internally has made me a better person to others out there. I think
it's wonderful, isn't it? It's like there's all this opportunity to resource yourself from the universe by being nice to people.
Yes. Kindness, I always think about it. Kindness is free and easy.
Yeah.
And if you help somebody, make someone smile, it's a gift, really. It makes you feel good.
It makes you feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're right. A lot of people are so wrapped up in themselves, unfortunately, in their own lives and their own suffering, they fail to see the other person suffering too. And I think that's an important lesson in your personal life, but also in business too. Everybody's got their own agenda when it comes to work and business. And so you really have to think about, how is this meeting affecting that person? Or,
Yeah. It's true, Scott. And, I just have a lot of compassion for people, because we're all, it's part of the paradigm to see the world that way. It sets us up to be competitive with each other, and to be isolated, and to be transactional about things. So it's not, what you just said isn't to call everybody selfish or self-absorbed or self-centered. It's in the nature of our egoic consciousness, which is amplified by this current paradigm we're in, which is very materialistic and physicalistic. So I just have a lot of compassion for all of us who are kind of suffering under that. But, more and more, we can all have these experiences of being and feeling connected. And there's great boon and balm in that.
I think it's also the rise of the technology too has enabled us. There's two parts of it. One, we're more connected than ever. We can talk to anyone over video around the world at any minute, and we can dial up a phone or text someone around the world. But at the same time, there's so much going on out in the world that it could be overwhelming too. I could look up the news and see what's happening, in some foreign country, and get really down and upset about it. Or I could look at something that's happening in a city in America and get upset about it. So how do you balance out the craziness with staying calm and cool in your own world without ignoring it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's staying calm and cool in your own world, and to the place where, from that grounded place, then you can look out on conditions, whatever they are. But to be the eye of the hurricane, as it were, it's possible to do this. It is.
Yeah, and it's easier than ever, I think, to help other people. And we are exposed to a lot more people than we used to be, and exposed to more news. And we have Twitter feeds, and we have social media. We used to have to wait till the 6:30 at night for the nightly news to find out what's going on in the world. Now that's old news, because I see it all day long on my computer.
Yeah, and the opportunity there is to really have us be the center of our own sense making and our meaning making. Right, because what we're doing as we look out there is we're concerned, obviously, about all of the violence and all of the chaos that's happening and the suffering that's happening. But we're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to find the meaning in it, and we want to know what we can do to help. Okay, so we need to make some sense and meaning in order to do all that. We've derived. Oftentimes, we derive sense and meaning from cultural narratives about things. And now is an opportunity, and it will be more and more, for us to be making our own sense out of our worlds from our sense experience. That word means senses, but it's also sense, like common sense. So I want to make sense of this, and I do that from my own sensory experience, not what some op-ed piece told me about, or not some story that might be 3/4 true, right? It's about my own discerning relationship with my own sense experience, which extends then to my relationship to the world and to my family and community. And so what's the meaning that I make out of that? Okay. If I'm living in vow, then I know what I want to do in the world. Okay. There's my meaning right there. Okay. What are your vows? What are your intentions? What are your commitments? You create the meaning out of your own commitments, out of your own desires to who you want to be and what you want to do.
I think what's so special about studying and practicing is that Zen and Buddhism are a foundational thing for me. And they give me a place to, almost like a safe place to come back to, even like after a long day of work, and then I'm out taking a walk, and then I come back to nature and my breathing. And then in the morning, I wake up and I'm happy to be alive, and I do my breathing. And it sort of gives me that rock of foundational energy to really then go out and deal with work meetings, or deal with people, or deal with driving in traffic or something like that. And I think that's really, the stronger that gets, the better I am able to handle whatever's coming next, because who knows what's coming next, right?
That's right. Yeah, not us.
I know. We don't know. We're not in control, right, Paul?
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, this is really great. And so just wanted to remind everyone that check out the Zen Shift on Substack and sign up for Paul's newsletter. Check out his coaching. We love, to hear about your coaching, Paul. It's really wonderful. And also One Body Sangha, your online Sangha community. So you got a lot of good stuff going on there. Anything else you want to add today?
I think that's it. Really enjoying, these conversations with you, and how are you doing on your shifts?
It's a daily thing. I'm doing
a daily thing, isn't it?
Daily thing. It's every day is a new day, and I'm working on it. I'm trying to get a tiny percent better every single day.
That's the spirit, right, Scott? Like every day's a new day.
Yeah. Every day is a new day, and everything is shifting all the time, and it is a game.
Mm-hmm.
Game of life, and if you apply the game of Zen to life, maybe it goes a little better.
Right on.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back soon with a new episode, and appreciate all your time today.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.